Welcome to Yaka Digital Network. When we study literature, poetry gives us intense emotion in a few words, and drama gives us live performance. But prose gives us something else entirely: time. A novel gives us the time to sit inside a character's mind and watch their interior life unfold, chapter after chapter. Take a look at this landscape. Many of the great East African prose texts we study, like Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, or Ngugi wa Thiong'o's The River Between, are grounded in settings just like this. We enter traditional societies like Umufia or the Kamino Ridges long before any external disruptions arrive to test their structures. To master these texts, we have to look past the basic plot and identify character motivation. Our job is to move beyond summarizing what happened and to start investigating exactly why a character decided to make it happen. We can break this down using a simple visual tool called a motivation map. We map out 3 structural pillars for any character action. First, their goal. Second, their driving trait. And third, the textual evidence we find to prove it. Isolating these 3 variables changes how you read. You stop passively accepting the events on the page, and you start actively investigating human behavior. Let's apply this to Okonkwo. Almost every decision he makes stems from one desperate goal: to be the opposite of his father. The driving trait forcing him to act is rigid hypermasculinity combined with an intense fear of failure. To find our evidence for this, we use characterization. Achebe could use direct characterization and simply state that Okonkwo was fierce. Instead, he relies heavily on indirect characterization, showing us Okonkwo's traits through physical actions and interactions. This image of a traditional djembe drum is a perfect example of how Achebe shows us who Okonkwo is. Rather than speaking to resolve conflicts calmly, Okonkwo rarely uses his words. He simply beats his drum to signal his authority and dominance. Let's test this with an active recall exercise. Why do you think Achebe chose to show us Okonkwo beating a drum instead of simply writing the word aggressive? Authors lean on indirect characterization because it forces you to weigh the evidence yourself. You discover the character's true nature by observing their actions, rather than taking the author's opinion as fact. Looking at this historical photograph of an outdoor classroom, we see the external catalyst that disrupts Okonkwo's world: the sudden arrival of European colonial institutions. Okonkwo's internal traits are about to collide with a massive external force. To analyze this collision, we use a technique called the narrative pivot. This is where we examine the exact same cultural clash through 2 entirely different character perspectives. Let's trace perspective A. Okonkwo looks at the new church and the new government strictly through the lens of his deepest fear. He interprets the newcomers as a direct threat to Umuofia's traditions and a deliberate attack on his own masculinity. Then we trace perspective B. A character like Obiarika observes the exact same arrival, but he interprets it with analytical caution. He watches, questions, and recognizes the complexity of the shifting power dynamics. We track these shifting dynamics using a technique tracker. Notice this final column highlighted in yellow. Explaining why the author used that specific perspective is the most important metric for securing top marks in your UNEB examinations. By juxtaposing these multiple viewpoints, we construct a fully objective 3-dimensional understanding of historical change, steering clear of a single biased account. This vintage illustration of a colonial tent encampment sets the stage for the narrative's climax. Okonkwo's foundational fear of weakness directly fuels the aggressive, militant actions he takes against these very camps. This introduces a crucial literary device: situational irony. This occurs when a character takes deliberate steps toward a goal, but those exact steps produce the complete opposite result. Okonkwo strikes down the colonial messenger to spark a war and preserve his cultural identity, but the village does not follow him. His violent attempt to save Umufia isolates him completely, and it is this exact action that accelerates his ultimate downfall. To map out complex arcs like this in your own reading, capture this prose technique's quick reference guide. Keep these 5 tools nearby: foreshadowing, flashback, symbolism, irony, and narrative voice. True mastery of prose means seeing past the surface of the plot to recognize the deliberate craftsmanship of the author. For more study guides, practice trackers, and comprehensive literature masterclasses, visit yaka.cc.